Now let's look at the virtual performance video editing. At this point, you already have your audio, you already have the ensemble sounding just the way you want it, and at this point, you're just creating a visual collage for it. So you're going to import your videos into the video editing software. You imported your videos into the audio editing software already and then created the audio track, but now you're going to import the videos into the video editing software. If your video editing software has the option to use proxy media, like Final Cut Pro does, then I would recommend doing it, especially if it's a larger project. Proxy media is going to create a simplified, reduced, much smaller version of the file, which is going to be easier for you to do edits, and it won't affect your system performance as much. Once you've imported your videos, then you can import your audio track as well. Your goal is to be syncing everything with your audio track because now that's your thing that's finished and perfect. The videos can slide around to match that. So this is what the interface for Final Cut Pro X looks like. There's a lot going on here, so let's break it down. Up here in the top left corner, that is your import button. So when you first open up Final Cut Pro and you don't have anything in it, then you're going to import your videos. When you import them, they're going to go into a library. Now, Final Cut Pro has 3 tiers of file organization. The biggest one is the library. And the library is going to contain a ton of different stuff for multiple different projects. Each of the projects they call events. And the events screen is right here within a library. The events have the little slate board on them. Each of the events will contain clips, and they call the clips projects. I don't think that the names are super intuitive. I think that they're maybe a little bit confusing, but the way to think of it is that there's the library, then there's the events, and then there's the projects. The library is a collection of a lot of different final videos. The event is each of those videos, and the projects are the clips that comprise that video. Your window right here in the top middle is your preview window. That is what the movie is going to be looking like at any point in time. And so you skim over to a certain spot, you look at it, that's what the movie is. Off to the top right, you have your different attributes to the video. So in this case, we have effects showing, and the effects are showing what's going on with that particular video. And we'll get to what all of that means in a second. And then down here, you have the effects and transitions screen. So an effect could be a blur. An effect could be resizing it to a specific place. A transition is things like a fade out. So that's kind of what's going on. In the top here, you have a little circle, and that's your background tasks. Keep in mind what's going on with that circle. That circle that's open means that it has a lot of background tasks that it's still accomplishing. And it's going to fill up like a pie chart once it's done. You'll see a little progress thing go around. Final Cut Pro works a lot in the background. So when you just let it sit and you're not moving anything around, you're not editing, it's going to start working on things. The biggest thing it's going to be working on is rendering. And rendering is basically taking the edits you've made and applying them to a video. It's not at all instantaneous. It takes quite a long time to do. And so it's going to be working in the background whenever possible. When you're done with something on the very top right, you have the export button, and that's going to take your video project into an actual movie. Just like the way we said with Logic Pro, you're going to take your Logic Pro project and it will bounce out and create an audio track. This is going to create a video file. So you can either import videos one at a time, which is going to help your machine run a little faster, but it's going to take a lot more time just going back and forth and importing. Or you can import them all and just kind of let it take some time to process that. But once you do, you're going to be working with one video at a time. You're going to use your audio track and that one video, and you're going to line them up using the sync points at the beginning. Once they're lined up, then you go to the next video. And after each video, you disable the one that you have already finished. So that's V is the shortcut in Final Cut Pro X. V disables it, and then you move on to the next, and then you do the next, and then the next, and then the next. Like I said, with the audio tracks, you're gonna look for the waveform and use it to visually line things up first. You can zoom in really close and line it up. And then you're gonna watch the video and listen to the audio tracks to make sure they're lined up. Now, remember, with the audio editing, we extracted the audio track from the video and we edited those. But when you bring your videos into the video editor, it still has its audio with it. So you can compare the video's audio with your master audio track and see if they line up that way as well. So you can use the visual sync points and you can listen to them, and that helps you line the videos up. You want to get all of the videos lined up in time sync. Once they're all synced, then you want to mute all of your videos because you're no longer going to be using the audio from the videos. You're going to be using your edited master audio instead. So you'll select all except the master audio track, and you're going to silence them. Now all your videos are in your software, and you have to decide what your movie is going to look like. So you need to create a storyboard. I did this by counting the total number of students I had in the project, and then I decided how many students were going to be in each scene. For my small group, it was only 12 kids. So every student was going to be in the scene, and that was the one scene for the whole show. But for my group of 80, I didn't want to have a group of 80 the whole time. I didn't think that that made as much sense, and it's too busy visually. So I selected students for each scene of the movie. I decided how many scenes that would be and how many students were going to be in each one. As you're doing this, you need to be aware of the splitting limitations of your software. Free software is not going to be able to split it very many times. So that means you would have to create a scene and then export it and then import it and then add it to other things. It's a lot of extra steps. So this is what my storyboard looks like, or this is part of my storyboard. I created it in Excel. You could just as easily create it in paper, but I didn't feel like erasing things and rewriting them. So I've got students on the right, and they're split up into different scenes. The black area is area where I'm going to be displaying lyrics. So I don't want any videos in those areas, but students are all in the rest of them. I've got the scene number. I've got where the scene happens as far as my timeline, which is really helpful that we were looking at things based on timelines before. That's each of my scenes. And then at one point in time in the video, there's the entire choir there, and they're all in this great big thing. It didn't look exactly like this in my final product because of just the way the videos ended up fitting into a screen, but this was a good starting point for me to kind of sketch it out. If you look at the bottom left of the screen, I have a number grid from 1 through 16. The software I was using made it very, very easy to put 16 people into one screen. And so those numbers are the position numbers. If there's 16 people into each screen, then that's where their numbers are going to assign them to. If I say you're position 2, you're going to be the second one there. The way Final Cut Pro plugins work on your screen splits is they're going to be talking about percentages of the screen. So if I have 16 students in my screen, that means that I've got 4 across and 4 down. Or another way of thinking of it is that each video across is 25% of the length, and each video down is 25% of the height. So if I have a screen split that says 25 wide, 25 high, that's going to be 4 by 4 or a total of 16. So that's what I used for this particular video. So once you decide who's going to be in which scene, you're going to apply grid positions to each of those students based on your storyboard. You're going to look back here and go, oh, well, my first person, Ainsley, is position number 1. So I'm going to assign her position number 1. Manually adjusting videos is incredibly time consuming. There are YouTube videos out there that recommend you just download a grid and you just manually adjust all the videos. I think that takes way too much time if you're looking at 50, 60, 70, 80 students. So I bought a screen splitter effect. It was $20. It's from fcpeffects.com. It's called Screen Splitter 2. And it auto applies a lot of those resizings so that your videos are smooth and clear and perfectly sized, and it takes very little time. If your student's shooting the video in the correct aspect ratio and the correct size and the correct format, then you should be able to just apply the effect without having to do any manual adjustments. Like I said before, splits are based on how many students are in each scene and what percentage of the screen it occupies. So your splits might be different. You might not be doing 16 on each scene. Some people like the clear black borders. I found that having no border actually reduces editing time, because if my videos are not absolutely perfectly aligned, it's really difficult to see that they aren't perfectly aligned because there's enough visual information on the overlap. So I really liked having no border, and it saved me a bunch of editing time, but you can do whichever one you want. Even with the screen splitter effect, I would say there were probably, 10% of my students that I had to do manual adjustments on. I don't know if there's a good way to avoid that, because someone's always going to not quite follow your instructions because they're humans, they're kids. But it was a much smaller amount. On ones that I did do manual adjustments for, I found ways that I can copy the attributes so that way I don't have to make those adjustments the same way every single time. And I'll show you that in a second. So this is the effects pane. This is on the right side of the screen on Final Cut Pro. And if you look, it's got a position. This is position number 10. So if you think to our 16-person grid, that's on the 3rd row. It doesn't have a border there. But if I did put a border there, I can adjust the border width and the border color and all of that. I can copy those positions and size and scale and everything from one video. And when I paste it, I Control-click paste attributes, and then that can resize multiple videos in the same fashion as one I've already done. Also down here, you can see the installed effects. This is my FCP effects. If you download the Screen Splitter 2 from myfcpeffects.com, fcpeffects.com, I said it wrong. Then it automatically shows up there, and then you've got all these options. So you've got 33 high, 33 wide with a black border. You've got 33 high, 50 wide with a black border. So you've got different options there. You have a ton of different ones that you can pick, that just whatever works for your project. And they're not even all squares. Some of them are triangles or strips. So again, effects at the bottom, positions and borders are right there. And then there's the effects list. Here, this off to the right side, that's the button to display effects. Effects, like I said, are things like resizing. Right next to it, if you click on the little sideways hourglass instead, that displays the transitions. Transitions are going to be things like fading in and out. For me, for my large group, it worked really well for me to export it in scenes, because there were so many videos. It made the program run very slow. It made my computer run very slow. So I created each student in a scene, and then I exported that scene. And then I created one big video where I picked from all of those scenes. This is going to be really similar to the way we put all of our audio tracks together. You put all of each part together, and then you export that. And then you take your whole ensemble, and you have your sopranos, your altos, your tenors, and basses. The video works the same way. I took group 1, group 2, group 3, group 4, group 5, group 6, group 7, group 8, and then I exported each of those, and then I pieced them together. It helped with performance. It helped with speed on editing as well. in any case, once you have all of your people and you figured out which scenes and you've resized the videos to be in those different parts of the screen, then you can create breaks. So you'll select all your clips, you'll place the cursor tool, the skimmer tool, at the exact moment that you want the transition, and then you'll make a cut. In Final Cut Pro, once you have everything there, you just press the B button and that will make a cut. Then you can disable the little snippets and clips for things that you don't want to show. So if I go back to, actually, I'll show it forward in just a second. If you want to add transitions, you can. You don't have to. A lot of times movies will just go from one scene to the next without a transition. A lot of my videos have done that, and it's just much easier. But if you want to have, a little transition from one to the next, the standard one is called cross dissolve, and that's in the transitions screen. And that can help sort of fade from one video to the next. For big videos with a ton of different student clips in them, you're going to run into some really, really long rendering times. It's going to take forever for things to process. It might affect your performance as well. So just kind of keep that in mind. Once you add those transition effects, it's going to slow things down a lot. So save them for as late as you possibly can. If you have issues with performance, like I said, you can export it and then import them in later once it's a final video and add the transitions. You probably want to have some sort of introductory text. You can create it within Final Cut Pro. You can create it within a lot of video editing software. They have preset things that allow you to do title animations, and you can use the title animations to also create things like lyrics or closing text. And then at the very end, I like to fade out the video, and that'll be the transition for fade to color. Whatever color you're fading to, you can fade to black, you can fade to white, you can fade to whatever. And then you can also import images, like I showed you one before that had our logo at the end that it faded to. So here's the title text screen. It's going to be on the top left here. You can display the title sidebar. And they have a lot of prefab animations there to show you that. Just different effects. There's tons and tons and tons. Scroll through and find the one you like. It gives you little previews of each one. The preview is going to show up on the main part of the screen, just like it would for your video clips. And then if it's not the right kind of options, you can adjust the font or the size or the alignment to get it to where you want it to be. When you're finally done with all of that, then you export your video. In Final Cut Pro, you're going to export as a master file, and you're going to change the video codec to H.264. If I go to the top right, if I go to the top right of my screen, then I've got my export button. I'm going to choose master file, and then I'm going to change the video codec to H.264. That saved me so much trouble because I tried to export it in a different format. And you can see down here at the bottom right that my estimated file size is 3.54 gigs. But depending on the format you use, it could be 10 times that. And if it's a huge, huge file, it's not going to save correctly. It's going to have stuttering and artifacts. It's not going to have audio and video in sync. It's going to cause problems. So by using the H.264 codec, that's going to be a much smaller file size, and it's going to have really good performance. Something to keep in mind is if you're posting this online, doesn't matter where you're putting it online, they're going to compress your file if it's beyond a certain point. So if you compress it yourself, you're going to have better performance issues, and you're not going to run into problems on the exporting side. Also, I should mention that if you've been using proxy media, the smaller versions of the media, during your editing process, you want to switch those back to the original before you do the export. Otherwise, your video quality will just suffer a little bit. It won't be bad. It just won't be as good as it otherwise would be. Then at this point, you take your video and you post it. You post it on YouTube or Facebook or wherever you want. YouTube even lets you create a premiere where it sends people notifications and it has a countdown and people can be live chatting. It's a lot of fun. We did a premiere for one of ours, and it was a really cool experience for the kids, especially since they couldn't do a regular concert. So if you have any questions, now is a good time to type them in. I'm just running through our summary here. We've got importing videos from our master audio track, importing videos from our cloud storage and our master audio track from the audio editing software we did. The first step is always going to be sync them in time. You don't want to do any edits until they're synced in time. Then you create a storyboard. You look at how many videos you have and you create a storyboard. Based on that storyboard, you apply the grid positions to each video so they know which part of the screen they're going to be occupying. That is where the Final Cut Pro Screen Splitter 2 plugin works really, really well. Once you have all those grid positions determined, then you decide who's going to be in which scene and how you're going to transition from one scene to the next. Now your performance part is done, and you just have to create the introductory title, the text, the closing, the credits, however you want to do that. And then you will export your video and distribute it. And then, ta-da, there it is. While we're So you'll notice the scenes are transitioning with each new group of students, and then within each scene, the lyrics change a little bit. So those don't even have to change at the same time in your video. And each one of these, the kids are recording, like see one's in a storage shed, one's in a car. They're all in their own homes, they're all in their own places. I actually found out that everyone having their own natural resonance of their bedrooms and whatnot created plenty of ambient resonance. And so I didn't have to do any sort of filters or effects or reverb or anything like that. I'm going to skip ahead just a little bit so you can kind of see uh, the next part. So up until now, we've just been doing the 16-person grid, which is a preset part of that. But when I go to more people, this isn't a preset grid. So you can do this a couple ways. You can do what I did, which is exporting each of those tiles and then importing them as their own video. Or you can actually apply the effects twice. You can say, take a fourth of the screen, now take a fourth of that, and it can shrink them down twice. So either of those ways are going to work out for you. I noticed that with as many videos as I had, it was giving me performance issues on the processor speed, and so I exported them and re-imported them. And so there we go. So that is one of the other virtual choirs that I've done. So with that in mind, final things to consider, and then we'll open up for a couple minutes of questions. Don't be afraid to start small. Start with a select group, start with a strong group, use a simple song. If you want, you can even do an audio only project. I know someone who they had an existing audio recording and they just had people lip sync to the audio recording and they did essentially a video only project. You can use existing accompaniment or existing recordings to save some time. You can use fewer performers or fewer performers per scene to save time. With one of the projects I did, I had 25 singers, but I never put more than 16 at a time. So that way I didn't have to worry about exporting and then importing again. It helps if you spend some time getting familiar with the programs first before you implement it, and that'll kind of save you some time on the back end. There's a gazillion videos on YouTube that you can look at and that will guide you through all of the editing process. And like I said before, give yourself lots of time so that way you can kind of work it at the pace you need to work.
There are a few questions. So let's see here. Viewing many virtual choirs, I've noticed that there are some where the students just sound like individuals singing, no real balance, and others sound incredibly balanced. What tips can you give to create a better balance? Some of us don't have that experience at all.
Great question. Great question. Okay, it's going to be a couple of different things. So if you can do them all, you'll be better off, but doing just some of them will help you out. One is start with a better product. So if you're doing some good rehearsals and your students are producing a very uniform, technically correct, beautiful tone, that's going to create better balance anyway. So start with there. On the recording process side, controlling things like sound levels and microphone distance and microphone sensitivity is going to really help. I had my students do a couple of demo recordings before their final recording and make some adjustments from there. So that certainly helped. When it comes down to the editing process, then the time that you spend making it uniform will definitely pay off. So, adjusting things like volume levels, adjusting things like doing an EQ and stuff like that, that can certainly help. It's going to be a lot of your professional discretion and your own taste. For me, I didn't want to go so far as to make it sound like it wasn't still a bunch of kids singing. And so you can definitely, especially with voices, editing can go too far, too fast, really easily. And you can get this kind of oddly artificial studio sound. So that you can stray too far with that. Even just having done these, I would make some subtle changes. If I could go back and do them again, I'm not particularly a fan of how my bass tone came out in certain parts of the last video. But you learn that as you go, and none of them are going to be perfect. One of the best bits of advice I got from someone is that rather than set yourself a clear goal, set yourself a clear timeline, and be generous with the timeline, but try to adhere to that and just say, hey, I'm going to spend this much time on it and I'm going to get it to the best level I can within that time. And at that point, I'm going to make peace with it, which is the exact same way that we would go when it comes to a concert. Our concert date isn't going to get pushed back if we're not quite ready. We're just going to be as ready as possible by that time. So I hope that answers that question.
I did have, Devlin, I did have some questions about how long it took you from, let's see, from the first to edit all the video, audio, and then to export the final. And then a similar question, how long did it take to produce all of the final product? So if you could give just a brief,
Yeah, that's a
picture
complicated
of
and
it,
somewhat terrifying answer, but I'll try to do my
right?
best. Okay, so the last video you saw was a piece that we were going to work on for UIL, which means that I gave it to my students in January. And we rehearsed in person from January until the first week of March when we no longer had school in person. And then online learning, such as it was, happened, and we had some rehearsals and whatnot. And then I produced the final product on May 21st, I think. 20th, something like that. So I guess the grand scope is that it took me from January until May, which is kind of what a concert cycle might have done anyway. As far as how much time you spend in the preparation and rehearsal time, that's going to depend a lot on you. If you have absolutely no background in this, then you're going to need to find, some resources. But hey, you're already here. So you already have a lot of these resources. I had to go and seek them out and talk to some people and compile these and learn how to use these programs. So there was a huge, huge learning curve for me, very steep learning curve, and that took a lot of time. For rehearsals, we only did rehearsals we did song submission recordings for a couple of weeks. And I did a different song each week that they submitted a recording for. And then we did rehearsals for a couple of weeks, and then their final project. So the rehearsal phase of it took about a month to 6 weeks. We were working on a bunch of different things. Then for the first one, for the James Bond recording that you saw, it took me a couple of days to do the video editing, and I actually had a student that volunteered to do the audio editing because there's only 12 people. It's pretty straightforward. It took them a couple of days. So for that particular video, it was a very advanced group. It took about a week or two for the students to submit the recordings, and it took about a week of really, really solid work to do the editing. Okay, so that's what I'm saying. Start small with a really experienced group, because we essentially put that piece together in a couple of weeks. Now, they had some good exposure to the song already. We didn't have to do a lot of rehearsals or anything together. For my big group that had a whole lot of beginners, and it was a much more technically challenging song, and it was a much more advanced video, that took months of prep work, and it took about 100 hours of editing work, which I know is really scary. But if you're not ready for 100 hours of editing work, which I don't even know if I was ready for 100 hours of editing work, that's what it took me. Don't do a giant, 9, 10, 12 scene video with 80 singers and a bunch of different effects and lyrics and things like that. A lot of that 100 hours that I spent was time learning what to do and learning what not to do, things like that. So, that was for me. So I guess anywhere from a couple of days to a couple of weeks to a couple of months, depending on what you do as far as the scope of the project and your experience level.
In the trial of Final Cut Pro, the compression is not available. Is it an additional cost?
For a project that I did with my wife for Fort Worth ISD, they did a choir director virtual choir video. It was all the directors, for all the middle school directors. And I used compression for that as well. I did not use compression for any of my choral stuff, because compression by its very nature limits the volume range, limits the dynamic range, and just makes everything generally louder. And so I didn't want that for my choral pieces, because I wanted that huge difference in the louds and the softs. And so if I needed a track to be louder, I just raised the volume of the track using the volume slider on the left-hand side. But for the one that I did for my wife for Fort Worth ISD, there were a couple of solo parts that were soloing over an ensemble, and those needed a compression. So, but you can use it. The trial is fully functional Final Cut Pro, fully functional Logic Pro. You can use all of those things. Now, some of the things you can only use in one of those two things. So, like if you're editing audio, you're doing all of your audio edits in Logic. If you're editing video, you're doing all of your videos in Final Cut. So in that instance, I needed compression. I did the compression in Logic first, and then just applied that to Final Cut, because I did no audio edits in Final Cut. It's just not a good program to do all of that for, unless it's just, very, 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 very simple stuff. But yeah, I was able to use EQ and compression, and I was able to use reverb. I chose not to. For all of those things. My website is there. You can just kind of learn a little bit about our program. Our YouTube channel, Townview Music Theory, has these virtual choirs on it, and you can see it there. The handout I gave you also has links to a whole lot of these things, including the rehearsal videos, some of the stuff that didn't show quite so clearly on our presentation. The handout that has the outline of this entire talk has a page of links with a ton of other stuff on it. So that handout will link you to everything else that we've covered. If there are
Awesome.
no
Thank
more
you.
questions, then
Hey, sorry.
oh,
Can I
good.
just ask one?
Absolutely,
Okay.
fire away.
Yeah, it may be more than what you can answer right now, but I didn't quite understand when you were saying copying the attributes from one video and using those for another video. Is that for the sizing of the video
Correct.
or placement?
It's for
Mm-hmm.
both. It's for both. It's the sizing and the placement of the video. So your attributes are cropping. So, cropping the image, it's moving the image. All of those are attributes. There are other things that are also attributes, but those are the two that are most important for what we're doing. And
Uh-huh.
so let's say I have a video that I had to manually edit, manually crop and move into the bottom left corner.
Yeah.
And then I later on in a different scene, I have another video that I have to move into the bottom left corner manually. I can go back to that first video and copy the attributes. So like control click, copy attributes, and then control click, paste attributes.
Control C is control click. Is that control C for copy?
So
I
if
don't know what control click is.
you control select, like click with your cursor,
What do you click?
the initial video that you've already manually
Oh, okay. So you just click on the video itself and
correct.
that will copy the attributes.
Yeah, you can also see it in the edit menu. You can edit, you look at your edit, copy attributes, edit, paste attributes. That's probably
Okay.
the more straightforward way to make sure you're copying the right thing.
Right. So you're not pasting the actual video
Right,
rather than
right. So if you select the video that you manually resized and moved, look in the edit menu and you copy the attributes, and then you can paste only those attributes.
Okay. Okay, great. Okay, so like if you double click on a Mac, you use two finger click, then you get that copy attributes.
Yeah,
So
you should. You should. Like I said, if you're not seeing it,
okay.
then just look at
Okay.
the edit menu.
Okay, great. I'm like, I understand the idea, but I don't know how to do it. But okay, yeah, that makes sense. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and just so you know, I mean, I did all of this on a Mac. I always did control click just to make sure that I wasn't doing a two-finger click. Um, there's so much with Final Cut and Logic that you're zooming in and out with two fingers, and I didn't want to risk like zooming to a wrong spot or moving my cursor strangely. So I was
Okay.
just very, very pedantic about whenever I wanted to right click, like I would use control click. It was just a way of preserving the chance of making a mistake.
Okay. I never realized that they were the same thing.
Yeah, yeah. And by doing a control click, you don't risk the chance of like zooming to a strange place. Because when I'm zoomed in really, 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 really tight on a video, if I just move it slightly, it really throws things off, and I like lose my cursor and things like that. So that's why I adopted the control click habit.
Okay, great. Awesome.
Yeah, yeah. My hope is that throughout all of this, I've made a lot of mistakes that I can kind of help people not make.
Exactly. Thank you. Thank
You're
you so
welcome.
much. Really
Yeah.
nice to have someone else do all of the learning curve for you.
Yeah, I mean, that's the whole idea behind teaching, right? You find someone else who's already figured out the wrong way to do it, and then you don't do it that way. Okay. Well, I think at that point, then, if there are no more questions, we're going to go ahead and end the meeting now. You can follow up with me with an email and ask me any questions there, and I'm happy to help. Thanks, everybody.